Be seated, please. Deputy Leader, come to order. New question. The Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. On May 21st, 2002, Dalton McGuinty moved an Opposition Day motion in this House and said, quote, "What would possess the government, I mean any government, to sell this asset?" Now we know, Mr. Speaker, what possesses this government. It's years of financial mismanagement and scandals, and the fact that they don't know how to pay for their promises. By selling a majority stake in Hydro One, Ontarians will lose control of this asset, and prices will skyrocket to pay for the last 12 years of this government's mismanagement fiscal.
Minister of Economic Development.
Premier, why are you selling a majority stake in Hydro One when you said yourself that you can't guarantee that hydro rates won't go through the roof?
Because we're broke. Thank you, Premier.
So, Mr. Speaker, let me just say to the interim leader of the opposition that in order for Ontario to move forward, in order for us to realize our potential as a province and a future economy that is solid, Mr. Speaker, we must invest in infrastructure. There's no option there, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. You talk to companies outside of this country, they look at us, Mr. Speaker, and they say, well, we like the look of Ontario, but we're not sure that you have the plan to invest in infrastructure that's necessary. Well, Mr. Speaker, we have that plan. This is about investing in new assets that are needed for today. It's about 20,000 jobs a year, Mr. Speaker, that is critical to our short-term prosperity. But in the long run, Mr. Speaker, we must make those investments. $16 billion in the GTHA, Mr. Speaker, and $15 billion on projects outside the GTHA. Those are necessary to the future prosperity of this province.
Back to the Premier. In 2002, Dalton McGuinty said, quote, "This government should know that when you turn a natural public monopoly over, it is the consumer who ultimately pays the price. Rates would go up. Rates could in fact go up dramatically, and there's nothing consumers could do." End of quote. Premier, you're not only giving up majority control, but you're taking $4 billion that by law is supposed to be used to pay down the hydro debt and lead to lower electricity prices for everyone, because we'd have less debt to pay off. Even with OEB oversight, Mr. Speaker, customers are already facing a 42% increase over 5 years in their hydro bills. Premier, if you can't guarantee that the sale of a majority in Hydro One won't increase rates any higher, why on earth would you expose the hardworking people of Ontario to even more hardship?
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, let me just say to the member opposite that as we have made this decision to make investments in infrastructure, in the transportation infrastructure within the GTHA and beyond, the transit, the roads, the bridges that we know are necessary, Mr. Speaker, we are being very careful not to make the mistakes that the PCs made, Mr. Speaker, when they sold off the 407. In fact, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly the model that we have looked at to say, well, we know that that is not what we can do, Mr. Speaker. So, making sure that the protections remain in place for people in this province, the regulatory protections, Mr. Speaker, as I said last week, if there's a transmission line that needs to be built in northwestern Ontario, we will make sure that that transmission line is built. The way that rates are set, Mr. Speaker, by the OEB, that's how they're set now, that's how they will be set in the future. Those protections are in place, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Final supplementary.
Premier, in 2012, former Energy Minister Chris Bentley said, and I quote, "We need to keep the whole asset in public hands, public control working for families and businesses." End of quote. Premier, you're now selling a majority share of Hydro One to pay for your scandals and irresponsible management of Ontario's finances. The government I was part of came to understand that losing control of a public asset like Hydro One is a mistake. Up until recently, the Liberal Party seemed to agree with us, Mr. Speaker. Premier, will you stop this foolhardy decision and keep a majority share of Hydro One in the hands of the people of Ontario who own the company?
Thank you. Premier.
So, Mr. Speaker, again, let's talk about exactly what it is we're doing, rather than the fiction that the member opposite is putting forward, Mr. Speaker. We are making a decision to invest in enhancements to the GO line, Mr. Speaker, a foundation for regional express rail that will allow us to have service, 15-minute service, Mr. Speaker, across the system. We are looking at projects like the Hamilton RRT and the Huron-Ontario LRT, Mr. Speaker. Outside of the Greater Toronto-Hamilton area, Mr. Speaker, we're looking at programs like Connecting Links, and I would hope that the party opposite that seems to talk about their concern for small town and rural Ontario would understand that having a Connecting Links program that supports the maintenance and the upgrading of roads, Mr. Speaker, that are necessary connections between those small towns and provincial roads, that having a program like that is critical, Mr. Speaker. That's the kind of infrastructure that we're investing in because we know our economic prosperity relies on it.
That's right. New question, the Leader of the Third Party.